Rain fell over New York. Cold drops hit the glass window, merging with the pale yellow glow of the city that never slept. Elena Monroe leaned toward her laptop, her tired blue eyes reflecting the lines of text appearing on the screen. The screen flickered. Italian words fragmented and chilling appeared on the classified file sent by the FBI just hours earlier. The goods will arrive through Boston port. Stay silent, or blood will spill. She froze. The coffee beside her had gone cold, but her heart hadn't. 3 a.m, a small apartment on the 17th floor. The only sounds were the rain and the soft clicks of the keyboard. Elena exhaled slowly. Translating criminal documents was never a job for the faint-hearted. But she needed the money to pay her grandmother's medical bills at St. Mary's Health Center. And aside from the FBI, no one was looking for a 29-year-old linguist fluent in Italian and Latin. Elena knew that one mistranslated word could cost lives. She used to think she was just a bystander to crime, untouched by that dark world. But when this report mentioned Christian Moretti, a name tied to disappearances, money laundering, and death, her heart clenched. She'd heard that name hundreds of times in intercepted calls, reports, and recordings. A low, sharp voice, switching between 2 languages, Italian to command, English to conceal emotion. A ghost wearing human skin. Elena took a deep breath and kept typing. Every keystroke felt like slicing into her own piece. She uploaded the final translation through the FBI's encrypted system. The clock read 2:47 a.m. Just 1 click on send, and she'd have enough money to cover another month of hospital fees. But the moment her cursor moved, the power went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Elena froze, her hand turning cold. Outside, a bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating her reflection in the window pane, trembling, and a shadow gliding behind her. She turned. A soft click, the sound of a lock being picked. Elena reached for her phone, but before she could press a button, the door burst open. 3 men in black raincoats stormed in like silent storms. One lunged for the laptop. Another twisted her arms behind her back. She tried to scream, but a rough hand clamped over her mouth. Elena Monroe. The voice was hoarse, laced with a familiar Italian accent. You thought you could translate our secrets without being noticed? Her heart plummeted. They knew her name. They knew what she'd done. I'm just a translator. I don't know anything, she choked out. The man smirked. Of course you don't. Everyone says that. Before they disappear. A black sack dropped over her head. The world dissolved into the scent of chemicals and darkness. When she woke, the smell of oil and rust filled her lungs. Harsh neon light buzzed above. Her hands were tied to a chair, trembling. Around her, a vast warehouse, silent except for water dripping from the leaking roof. A man stood with his back to her. White shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark wavy hair composed, terrifyingly so. Elena had never seen him, but she knew instantly Christian Moretti. He turned. His gaze was a blade cold, black, unblinking. You're the FBI translator. Elena bit her lip, silent. You know more than you should. He stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. They say you can read between the lines. Then tell me, what do you read in me now? What am I about to do to you? She forced her voice steady. If your goal is to scare me, congratulations. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He smiled faintly, a smile that never reached his eyes. Brave, but not wise. Christian gestured to his men. A black gun clinked onto the metal table. Elena's breath caught. For what it's worth, she said. I didn't keep any copies. The FBI holds the only file. I know, he replied calmly. And I also know. You've never lied in any of your translations. He pulled a folded document from his pocket and tossed it onto the table, her file photo. Address, work history, even her grandmother's medical record. Elena's stomach dropped. I could kill you right now, Christian said quietly, his tone weary more than cruel. But I won't. Why? She whispered. His eyes softened for just a second. A shadow of pain flickered there. Because you once saved someone in my family, without knowing it. Elena frowned. Saved 7 years ago. The Boston federal case. You translated testimony that helped my father get a fair trial. You didn't twist his words, even under threat. I read that report. I remembered your name. The silence thickened. He stepped forward, removing the chain around his neck, a pendant engraved with the old Moretti crest. From this moment, you live under my protection. No one touches you without my command. Elena's voice broke. And if I refuse, Christian leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. Then they'll find your body before dawn. Outside, engines roared. Elena was pushed into a black SUV. The city blurred beyond the glass, only rain and light remained, washing away everything she knew. Inside the car, Christian sat beside her in silence, eyes fixed on the road. Elena noticed the scar on his knuckle rough. Human. Too human. Not the monster she'd imagined. She finally whispered, afraid to disturb the quiet. Did you save me because you owe me? Or because you need something from me? Christian didn't look at her. Both. I don't belong in your world. Don't worry, Elena Monroe, after tonight, your world won't exist anymore. The words were soft, almost gentle, but they made her heart fall into a void. Outside, the rain stopped. New York faded into the distance, and ahead a new road, blurred and uncertain, where the line between captor and savior began to disappear. She didn't know yet that the man who just saved her life would also be the one to shatter her heart, then rebuild it in the fire of love and sin. If you want to know what awaits Elena beyond the Moretti gates, follow Part 2, The Ring and the Lie. A secret is about to be revealed, and not everyone will survive to tell the tale. The night's rain had washed New York clean, leaving streaks of gray clouds smeared across the sky like ink stains. When Elena woke up, the world around her was no longer the same. No sirens, no city lights, only the scent of oak wood, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the faint echo of classical music drifting from somewhere unseen. She sat upright. The bed beneath her was too soft. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, too refined for a prison cell. The room was spacious, sunlight filtering through thick curtains, illuminating old Italian paintings on the wall. She was still wearing the same clothes from last night. Her throat was dry. The door opened, and Christian Moretti stepped in. Gone was the white, rain-drenched shirt from the night before. Now he wore a light gray suit, no tie, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His dark hair was slightly tousled, but his eyes were still sharp, sleepless, unreadable. You're awake. His voice was deep and calm, as though greeting a guest. Elena glared at him. Where am I? The Moretti estate. Connecticut. She froze for a few seconds. That name she had seen it countless times in reports. She translated the meeting ground of the Mafia elite, the kind of place people entered but never left. Why did you bring me here? Christian moved closer, closing the distance between them to only a few feet. He sat on the chair across from her, arms crossed. To keep you alive. The words were soft, almost gentle, but they made her heartbeat quicken. Elena steadied her voice. You can let me go. I'll leave New York. No one will ever know. He gave a faint smile, not mocking, more like weary amusement. You're too naive. Elena, you're not just a translator anymore. You know too much. Everyone who touched that file is dead except you. He stood, reaching into his pocket. A glint of gold, a ring, old and engraved with the image of a falcon and two initials. R. Elena frowned. What's that a way to make them stop hunting you? He stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers. From now on, everyone will believe you're my fiancé. Elena recoiled, bumping into the bed frame. You're insane. Maybe, he replied evenly. But in my world, titles protect better than laws. He took her hand warm, firm, unyielding. She tried to pull away, but he slipped the ring onto her left ring finger. The cold metal kissed her skin, sending a strange shiver down her spine, like a mark that could never be erased. Christian released her hand and looked straight into her eyes. From today, you'll stay within the estate. There's staff, a library, an office. If you need to go anywhere, speak to Franco, my right hand. He'll accompany you. I don't need protection. You're wrong. Elena, you need protection even from the people I call allies. She said nothing. Instead, she studied him, searching for a trace of emotion in that composed face. He didn't look threatening. Now he looked tired. Tired like someone who had been carrying an entire world on his shoulders. As he reached for the door, she finally asked softly, "Why me?" Christian paused, turning slightly. The morning light caught his hair, outlining it with a silvery halo. "Because you remind me of someone who died because I couldn't protect her." The door closed, leaving Elena alone with the silence. She stayed at the villa for 3 days. On the first, she only stood by the window, watching the vast garden and the clear lake reflecting the Connecticut sky. That peace felt cruel, like a paradise-turned prison. On the second, she began to walk around. The servants bowed politely, calling her Miss Monroe with a mix of respect and unease. They referred to her as the fiancée. Every time she heard it, a chill ran down her spine. On the third day, she found her way to the library. Among the towering bookshelves stood an old piano, its lid covered in dust. She brushed it gently, the keys still gleamed beneath the haze. The first note she pressed rang out clear, sorrowful, like a memory. "You play." The voice behind her startled her. Christian stood there, holding a glass of red wine, watching quietly. "A little. From college. Play for me." She hesitated, then placed her fingers on the keys. Claire de Lune filled the room, a soft, melancholic current flowing through the still air. Christian said nothing, only listened, his eyes gentling just for a moment, but enough to unsettle her. When the song ended, he set the glass down and walked closer. "Do you know why I keep this piano? Because it's beautiful." He shook his head. "Because it was the last thing my mother touched before she died. She used to say anyone who can bring music back to life can soften a heart." He paused. "I never believed that. Until now." Elena looked up, meeting his eyes deep, shadowed, filled with something she couldn't name. For a fleeting second, she saw herself reflected in them, lonely, frightened, yearning to be understood. She stood, keeping her distance. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because someone might believe you." He smiled faintly. "And if I want you to believe me, then I'll only be more cautious." Christian said nothing more. He bent down, picking up the ring she had slipped off while playing. He held it up, letting the light catch the gold. "It belonged to my mother." Elena froze. "You? Don't worry, I'm not using it to bind you. I just don't have anything else valuable enough to protect your life." He placed it back in her palm and walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of wine and a warmth that lingered like a ghost. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She opened her laptop and typed a few lines into her encrypted journal, the one only she could access. "I should be afraid of him. But why does his presence make me feel strangely safe? Maybe because in his eyes, I see my own reflection lost between two worlds, unsure what's right or wrong." She closed the lid. A soft knock came. Franco, the salt and pepper-haired man, entered with quiet courtesy. "Sorry to disturb you. Miss Monroe, the boss asked me to deliver this." He handed her an envelope. Inside, a bank card and false identification papers bearing the name Elena Moretti. "I don't need this." Franco's voice was calm. "You do. It's the only way you'll survive if someone comes looking." He hesitated before adding quietly, "The boss lost an older brother once betrayed by someone he trusted. Since then, he hasn't trusted anyone. Until you." Elena said nothing. When the door closed, she sat in silence, the cold ring gleaming faintly in her hand. The next morning, Christian was gone. The staff said he'd gone to New York for a meeting between families. Elena ate breakfast alone, but her stomach churned. The news on TV mentioned a small explosion near the docks suspected organized crime activity. By afternoon, Franco returned, his expression grim. "The boss is on his way back. There's been a betrayal. Someone sold information to the Russians." Elena stood up. "Is he hurt?" Franco hesitated, then replied, "But he ordered you to be moved to the East Wing tonight. Things are worse than he expected." Before she could speak, the door burst open. Christian walked in, shirt stained with traces of dried blood. His eyes darkened when he saw her. "I told you not to leave your room. I just heard the news. I was worried about you." He was silent, then gave a faint, humorless smile. "Worrying about someone like me is dangerous." Elena. He walked past her, removed his gun, and placed it on the table. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air. She watched him, this man capable of commanding death, yet the same one who had brewed her coffee the morning before. Christian sat down, leaning back, eyes closed. They say you're fragile. Who? Those who want me to believe you're a threat. Elena's hands tightened. And do you believe them? He opened his eyes, gaze steady. I'd rather believe you. The distance between them vanished. The silence thickened. In the fading light, Christian's eyes no longer looked cold, they looked human, vulnerable. He reached out, brushing his fingers against the ring on her hand. His voice soft as wind from now on. Anyone who sees you will see my mark. What I didn't expect was to start seeing yours on me. Elena froze. Before she could grasp the meaning of his words, Christian turned away, murmuring something to Franco in Italian. The fragile warmth between them vanished. Outside, rain began to fall again. Inside, the lamp flickered its light glinting off the ring on Elena's finger, bright and cold. Like an invisible chain binding two souls drawn into a game neither could escape. Morning in Connecticut carried the scent of lavender and damp wood. Mist floated above the lake in front of the villa, reflecting the pale silver sky. Elena sat by the window, holding a cup of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. She hadn't slept all night, not from fear, but because Christian's words kept echoing in her head. I've started to see your mark in myself. She didn't understand what he meant, but her heart still raced every time she remembered his voice. Part of her wanted to believe he felt something real. Another part warned her she might just be another pawn in his intricate game. Outside, footsteps sounded softly. Franco appeared at the doorway, holding a morning newspaper. News from New York. Miss. Elena took it. The front page showed a photo of a warehouse explosion. The headline reading, Suspected Internal Purge Among Italian Mafia Families. Below it was a side shot of Christian Moretti, his expression cold, distant. She stared at the image for a long time. The man in that photo seemed so different from the one she'd met, the one who had listened to her play the piano, who'd placed a ring on her finger, who'd said he wanted to protect her. Were they really the same person? Franco observed her for a moment before saying quietly, The boss didn't want you reading the papers. But you should know, no one died in that explosion. The boss saved 3 people, including a child. Saved. Elena looked up, startled. Yes, the child was the son of a traitor. Everyone thought the boss would kill him, but he only said sin is not inherited. Elena was speechless. Christian Moretti, the man the city called the devil in a suit, had saved the child of his enemy. She gripped the newspaper tightly. Everything about him was a contradiction, and she no longer knew what to believe. That afternoon, Christian returned. He came with 2 bodyguards, his black coat slung over his shoulder, a white bandage wrapped around his wrist. A minor wound, perhaps, from the explosion. Elena stood at the steps when the car stopped. Their eyes met for a brief moment, long enough for her to sense that something in him had changed. He looked exhausted, but warmer. You read the news? His voice was husky, as if he already knew. Elena nodded. They call you a devil. Christian shrugged, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. The price of surviving in this world. If they fear me, they won't betray me. But you saved your enemy's child. He paused, his dark eyes shadowed. Sometimes, the only thing that reminds me I'm still human is choosing not to be like them. His words silenced her. He walked past, leaving behind a faint scent of smoke and whiskey. Without thinking, she whispered, Christian, you don't have to be a devil, not to everyone. He stopped, but didn't turn back. I know, but sometimes, to protect what I want to keep, I must be the devil to the rest of the world. That night, Elena couldn't stay away. She found his study a room smelling of tobacco and old paper, its heavy wooden door slightly ajar. Warm light spilled out from his desk lamp. Christian was seated, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the bandage stark against his skin. Without looking up, he said, I thought you'd be asleep. I couldn't. Neither could I. Elena stepped closer, stopping behind him. On the desk lay blueprints of a building precise, elegant, almost cold in their perfection. "You're drawing again." "I never stopped." He looked up briefly, voice softer. "When I can't control the blood and chaos outside, I draw to remind myself I once wanted to build, not destroy." Elena smiled faintly, her tone like a whisper of wind. "Maybe that's why I can't bring myself to fear you completely." Christian stood. The space between them vanished only a breath apart. His gaze locked onto hers, a mixture of restraint and something deeper. "Elena, you're in danger here. Everyone out there believes you're my fiancé. They'll test that belief. Test it how you'll have to act like you love me." She let out a soft, bitter laugh. "You think I can pretend to feel something I don't?" His eyes darkened. "That's what I'm wondering too." He stepped closer, voice low and steady, impossible to ignore. "Next week, there's an auction in Manhattan. I need you by my side. They must believe we're real." She lifted her chin. "And if I refuse?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for her wrist, brushing his thumb over the ring. "Then this ring means nothing." His voice dropped even lower. "And I'll lose my reason to keep you safe." Elena froze. Her pulse quickened. His eyes weren't threatening, they were afraid of losing something he hadn't yet named. After a long silence, she whispered, "Fine, I'll go with you. But I won't pretend to love you." Christian tilted his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "I don't need you to pretend. I just need you there." The next morning, the villa buzzed with energy. Tailors, stylists, event coordinators moved in and out. Franco instructed her on etiquette, how to walk, where to place her hand on Christian's arm in public. "No acting," he said. "Just look like you belong to him." Elena studied her reflection in the mirror, a silk gown of deep emerald, hair swept up, lips tinted rose. The woman in the glass was no longer the timid girl from 3 weeks ago. She looked composed, calm, and a little cold. The door behind her opened. Christian stood there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, silver tie, hair slicked back. He looked at her for a long moment, speechless. "You." He paused, then said quietly, "You look like you were born to make me lose control." Elena turned away, hiding a small smile. "I thought you never allowed that. I didn't, but you do it anyway." The moment broke when Franco appeared to announce the car was ready. Christian extended his hand. "Let's go. My fiancé." Elena hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, his grip gentle, almost careful. The auction was held in a glass building overlooking the Hudson River. Marble floors gleamed beneath chandeliers. Soft music played as men in tuxedos and women in gowns exchanged polite smiles with sharp intent. Christian walked beside her, his hand resting lightly at her back. Eyes followed them, curious, assessing, envious. A gray-haired man with an air of authority approached. "Christian, I hear you're engaged and without telling anyone?" "Quite a surprise." Christian smiled, calm as ever. "When love happens, you know it doesn't ask for permission." Elena felt his hand tighten slightly against her back. She tilted her head and replied smoothly, "We were surprised too." "Sir?" The man chuckled knowingly and moved on. Christian leaned down and murmured, "Perfect, I just told the truth. That's exactly why they'll believe you." Then the lights dimmed, music slowed. The host invited couples onto the dance floor. Christian turned to her, hand outstretched once more. "May I have this dance?" "Elena." She hesitated, then took his hand. He guided her onto the floor, his arm gentle at her back, their steps slow and sure. The world faded, only heartbeat, breath, and the space between them remained. Elena had never realized that dancing could be a kind of conversation wordless, but painfully honest. Christian leaned closer, his voice a whisper at her ear. "If anyone asks, tell them you fell in love with me at first sight." She replied softly. "And you? When did you fall for me?" He smiled, saying nothing, only pulled her closer. Light streamed through the glass ceiling, glinting off the golden rings. To everyone watching, they were perfect together, but only they knew between them stood a fragile wall where truth and pretense blurred. and one wrong step could cost blood. As they walked down the hallway after the gala, Christian suddenly stopped. Leaning close, his voice dropped to a near whisper, raw and real enough to make her shiver. "I don't know if we're pretending anymore or if this is real." Elena looked up, her voice barely audible. "I'm not sure either." Outside, New York glittered, the hum of cars mixed with the night wind. Inside, two souls bound by a lie began to realize their hearts might already be beating in the same rhythm. Dawn stretched softly over the tree-lined road leading back to the Moretti estate, the sunlight filtering through the car window warm and misty like gold behind fog. Inside the car, neither of them spoke. Christian leaned back against the seat, eyes half closed. Elena watched his reflection in the window. Under the morning light, his face was calm, too calm, as if the tension from the night before had never existed. Last night, they had danced like two people truly in love. She didn't know when she had stepped too deeply into the role, and perhaps he didn't either. She turned away. Outside, Connecticut was changing seasons. The maple leaves had begun to turn red. Autumn, the season where people most easily lose themselves between memory and the present. After breakfast, the villa fell quiet again. Christian disappeared into his study. Franco handed Elena a small ring of keys. "The boss wants you to feel at home. You may go anywhere on the grounds, except the west basement." The west basement, the way he emphasized it, sent a chill down her spine. She didn't ask, only nodded. But the thought of that forbidden door lingered in her mind like an unanswered question. By noon, she wandered into the garden. The lake mirrored the fiery trees above it, and in the far corner, she noticed a small wooden house, simple, out of place among the estate's grandeur. Inside came the sound of carving. Christian was there, sleeves rolled up, shirt damp with sweat, hammer and chisel in hand, shaping a doorframe by himself. Elena stopped, surprised. She had never imagined that a man like him, cold, powerful, a man who had once ordered deaths, could also fix a door with his bare hands. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You came at the right time. I thought you didn't like being disturbed." He smiled faintly, setting the hammer down. "I don't, but you're quiet enough to make the silence feel bearable." His words made her bite her lip. She stepped closer, fingers brushing over the smooth wood. "What are you making a refuge? When everything out there collapses, I want to have at least one thing built by my own hands." She glanced around. The room was empty except for rough wooden furniture and a few unfinished sketches on the wall. On the table stood a canvas, a half-finished painting of a city skyline, divided between light and shadow. "You're painting New York, no? I'm painting my contradiction." He gave a faint, sad smile. "Half belongs to darkness, half still clings to light." Elena stood beside him, gazing at the painting. Her voice was soft as breath. "Maybe that's why I can't understand you. So you're trying to—" She looked up, caught by his calm, unguarded eyes so deep they made her feel seen to the bone. "I just want to know how lonely a man the world fears most can really be." He went still for a moment, then said quietly, "You shouldn't want to know that. Elena, some loneliness can only exist in darkness. When someone steps into it, it turns into pain." She didn't reply. They stood in silence, fragile, intimate, like a thread stretched too thin but impossible to break. That afternoon, Elena returned to her room, the scent of wood and his quiet gaze still lingering in her mind. On her desk lay a small box, unmarked except for a folded note. "Don't fear what you don't understand." Inside was a fountain pen engraved in Italian, "La verità ti libera." "The truth will set you free." The word "you" was written in the intimate form. Christian had never spoken to her that way before. She uncapped the pen. Inside, near the rim, was a tiny engraving, the same symbol as the ring on her finger. She realized then this wasn't just a gift. It was a message. Night fell. Rain began to pour again. Elena sat by the window, flipping through her old notes. She wanted to reread the FBI file she had once translated, the one that mentioned Christian. The Italian sentence she'd skimmed over back then now sent a chill through her. Target the Moretti heir. Potential cooperation with the U.S. government in exchange for full immunity. Her breath caught. She had never paid attention to that line before. It was just one detail among hundreds. But now it was different. The question sliced through her thoughts like a blade. Was Christian working with the FBI? The next morning, when he entered the dining room, she was already there, her gaze calm, too calm. Christian sensed something off. "You're up early. I couldn't sleep." She set her cup down, voice steady. "Christian, there's something I need to ask." "Ask? You used to work with the FBI, didn't you?" The air froze. He looked at her, not angry, just regretful. "Who told you that?" "No one. I just connected the pieces." Christian placed his glass down. His voice was low, quiet, real. "There was a time I thought about it, a deal for freedom, but I don't believe in freedom granted by others, so I refused." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Now, I don't believe in their world either. I only believe in what I choose to keep." "And what is that?" His answer came without hesitation. "You." Elena's heart tightened. The simplicity of it made her want to believe, even though reason told her not to. She turned away, voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if you're telling me the truth, or just what you think I want to hear." Christian gave a sad smile. "Maybe both." He stepped closer, stopping just behind her. His voice was low, warm, and heartbreakingly sincere. "Elena, if one day you leave this place, just remember one thing, that a sinner once tried to be good because of you." That evening, heavy rain returned. Christian had to go out to meet someone. Before leaving, he told Franco, "Keep her safe." But when night fell, Elena heard footsteps in the corridor. She opened the door. Franco was gone. The rain muffled the sounds, but faint voices drifted from the direction of the west basement. A strange voice, not Christian's, not one of the staff. Her pulse quickened as she followed quietly down the hall. The basement door was slightly ajar, light spilling through the crack. Inside, two men were talking. One of them was Franco. She caught fragments of their words. "The boss shouldn't trust that girl. She's investigating. I know, but you don't understand. She's changed him. If anyone hurts her, Christian will destroy us. So you'll let her ruin everything." Something clattered. Elena gasped softly. She'd brushed the door. Both men turned sharply. Franco froze when he saw her. "Elena, you shouldn't be here." She stepped back, voice shaking. "What did you mean by ruin everything?" "You don't understand. Things are changing. And you're his only weakness." Before she could ask more, another door burst open. Christian stood there, soaked from the rain, eyes sharp as blades. He looked from Franco to Elena, his voice hoarse but decisive. "Who gave you permission to come down here?" Elena stepped back, silent. Their eyes met his, filled with restrained fury, hers with hurt confusion. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her upstairs. The heavy door slammed shut behind them, burying every explanation. In the corridor, the yellow light flickered weakly. He released her, breathing hard. "I told you never to go down there." "Why? Because that's where you hide your secrets." "Or because you're afraid I'll learn too much. Because I don't want you tangled in things that will kill you." His voice cracked raw, desperate. Elena stared at him, eyes glistening. "But I've been tangled in them since the moment you put this ring on my finger." She turned and walked away before he could say another word. Behind her, Christian stood motionless, his hands clenched so tight that blood welled beneath his nails. Outside, thunder rolled through the night, rattling the windows as if to remind them both. The real storm had only just begun. The sky over Connecticut was a dull gray, the kind that promised rain. Elena stood by the window, her fingertips brushing the cold glass. The memory of last night still burned vividly in her mind, Christian's furious eyes, his hand gripping her wrist as he dragged her away from the basement. And his voice, sharp as a blade, "I told you not to go down there." Since dawn, he hadn't appeared. Franco remained completely silent. The air in the mansion was so heavy that even the wind seemed too afraid to stir the curtains. Elena stepped into the garden, her shoes soaked with dew. She stared at the still surface of the lake, her reflection trembling beside the faint memory of Christian's face. There was something in him that made her want to run, yet made it impossible to leave. That afternoon, the library doors opened. Christian appeared, wearing a black shirt, his wrist still wrapped in white gauze. He stopped when he saw her reading quietly amid the shelves. I thought you'd be angry enough to leave. Elena didn't look up. If I did, would you let me go? He hesitated before answering softly. No. She finally met his eyes, calm and steady. Then being angry makes no difference. Christian sat across from her. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, cutting across his face half in light, half in shadow. There's nothing in that basement you need to see. I need to know everything that threatens my life. He looked at her for a long time, and his gaze softened. That's not my secret. Elena, it's my family's sin. She spoke quietly. You're afraid of what I'll think of you if I know the truth. He gave a small, pained smile. No, I'm afraid you'll pity me. Elena closed her book and stepped closer, just half a step between them. If you trust me at all, let me see the real you, not the man the world fears, the one who still fears himself. A breeze stirred, rustling the papers on the desk. Christian reached for her hand, not to hide anything, but to hold on to something real before it slipped away. Tomorrow, I'm taking you to New York. Why? There's someone you need to meet, and something I need to prove. The next morning, rain fell softly. The black car rolled out of the estate, tires hissing over wet asphalt. Elena gazed out the window as the misty fields faded behind them. She didn't ask, her instincts told her the answers ahead would change everything. When they stopped, they stood before an old riverside building, once a shipping company, now abandoned. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with iron and salt. Christian led her through a long corridor scarred by old bullet holes. At the end was a small room. Someone waited inside. Franco opened the door quietly. He's here, sir. Elena froze when she saw the man in the shadows, gray-haired, familiar from old FBI files. Angelo Moretti? Christian's father, the man believed to have died 10 years ago. Christian's voice dropped. I told them you were dead. The older man smiled faintly. If they knew I was alive, they'd have killed you instead. Elena took a step back, her heart tightening. You've been hiding him here all this time. Christian turned toward her, eyes filled with equal parts pride and despair. He was the leader once. When everything fell apart, I took his place, his power, his guilt, his punishment. Angelo's rough voice cut through the silence. You must be Elena. The girl my son believes can save him. She hesitated, then nodded. I'm only here to learn the truth. The man's smile was bitter. The truth, my dear, is that no one walks out of this darkness unbroken. Not even my son. Christian's grip tightened around her hand. We're leaving. The ride back was silent. Elena's mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask. She watched his reflection in the rearview mirror, his face calm, but his eyes haunted, fragile, like a wound that refused to heal. Finally, she whispered, How long will you keep this secret? His voice came low and hoarse, until I have no one left to protect. She turned to him, her words barely a breath. And who protects you? Christian didn't answer. That night, fog settled over the estate. Elena sat before the fireplace, watching the flames flicker in her sand-steady eyes. She heard footsteps approach Christian. He sat beside her without a word. For a long time, only the fire spoke. Then he said quietly, When my father fell, I thought I had to become what he was to protect whoever was left. But the harder I tried, the more I became him. Elena's voice was soft. You're not like him. How am I different? You regret... Christian turned to her. In the firelight, his eyes glistened gold. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. You remind me who I used to be? Elena smiled faintly, her lips trembling. And that makes you weaker, doesn't it? He nodded once. Yes, but for the first time, I'm not afraid of being weak. They sat in silence, the fire crackling softly, between light and shadow. The distance between them disappeared until their breaths mingled as one. Christian leaned in, his lips touching hers, a fragile kiss, hesitant, as if one wrong move might shatter her completely. Elena closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat race against her chest. She knew this moment was dangerous. Love in his world was a blade, sharp enough to draw blood between life and death. When he finally pulled away, his voice was rough, trembling. "If one day I'm gone, don't look for me." She opened her eyes, searching his face. "You speak as if you've already chosen the ending." He stroked her cheek, gaze distant. "In this world, we don't choose our endings, but I can choose the way you survive." Elena caught his hand, holding it tightly. "Then I can choose to stay." Christian said nothing. His eyes lingered on her, full of words he couldn't say. Then he slipped his hand free, stood up, and walked out into the rain. Elena remained by the fire, watching the flames fade to embers. The warmth ebbed away, leaving only the smell of ash and rain drifting through the open window. Outside, an engine roared to life, then grew distant. She knew that every time Christian left at night, someone never came back. But this time, deep down, she felt the one disappearing might be him. It had rained for 3 days straight. The Moretti estate lay wrapped in an uneasy silence still, yet on the verge of breaking. Since the night Christian left, Elena hadn't seen him. Franco said he was handling business in New York, but the way his eyes shifted told her that was only half the truth. Elena walked down the long corridor bathed in dim yellow light. The house felt too big without him. Every room still held traces of his presence, the faint scent of whiskey, an unfinished melody on the piano, his coat still hanging loosely on the back of a chair. Everything whispered that he was still here, but only in memory. She didn't understand why her heart felt so heavy. Since meeting Christian, her life had been one storm after another. Fear, anger, longing, then aching affection. Every emotion carried his shadow. That afternoon, a plain envelope arrived, no sender. Inside was a photograph of Christian standing beside a woman in a red dress. He was smiling a small, intimate smile that made Elena's chest tighten. Below the photo, scrawled in messy ink, were the words, "Don't trust him. He destroys everything he touches, including you." Elena sat still for a long time, her thoughts tangled. What she felt wasn't jealousy. It was fear that everything she had begun to believe in was crumbling. That night, she went to find Franco. "Do you know who this woman is?" Franco glanced at the photo, his face darkening. "You shouldn't trust what you see. So it's real." Then Elena, "Sometimes the boss has to act to survive. He's not like other men. Every move he makes is a gamble." The ambiguity of his answer only made her heart sink further. Near midnight, she heard the sound of a car at the gate. Her pulse jumped. Christian had returned. The door to the living room swung open. He stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat, his face shadowed. Light glinted off his wet hair, and a faint trace of blood stained his collar. Elena stood on the steps, saying nothing. She waited for an explanation, but Christian only met her gaze, weary, silent. "Where were you? Where I needed to be? With whom?" He didn't answer. Elena's hand trembled as she held up the photo. "Who is she?" "Christian." He froze. For a second, his expression turned cold. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter. I just want the truth." He stared at her for a long time, then gave a faint, bitter smile. "The truth is never simple." "Elena, what do you want to hear? That I was with another woman, or that I don't deserve your trust?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I just want to know if I'm only another performance to you." Christian stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. "If I say no, will you believe me? I don't know." Her voice broke. "You told me not to fear what I don't understand, yet you've kept me in the dark." He closed his eyes, as if exhausted to the bone. "I kept things from you, to protect you. But maybe I was wrong." He turned and walked away before she could speak again. The sound of the door slamming echoed down the empty hall, leaving her standing alone in the vast silence. That night, she dreamed. In the dream, Christian was drowning in a sea of blood. She stood on the shore, clutching the ring he'd given her. She tried to reach him, but with every step, the ground turned to black mud, pulling her deeper. When she finally touched him, he dissolved into smoke. Elena woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The ring on her finger was cold as ice. The next morning, Christian was gone again. Franco only said he had a meeting in Boston. But an hour later, Another envelope arrived, this time with an audio recording inside. Christian's voice came through, low, steady, and filled with conflict. Things are spiraling out of control. If I fail, get her out of here. Don't let them find out who she really is. Elena listened over and over, each word hitting her chest like stones. Who she really is. The phrase echoed in her mind. What did he mean? That afternoon, while cleaning his study, she accidentally pulled open a loose drawer. Inside was a stack of old files, bound with a strip of leather. The label read, Elena Monroe, Translator, FBI Asset 2015 to 2018. Her blood ran cold. Inside were copies of the documents she had once translated, but now signed by Christian, stamped with proof that he'd accessed them years ago. The final note on the page made her go still. She knows nothing. Keep her out of the plan until it's done. A tear fell onto the paper. She had trusted him so deeply she forgot he was born into a world where lies were a means of survival. When Christian returned that night, Elena was sitting in the library, the file open in front of her. He stopped in the doorway and realized it was too late. You found it. His voice was hoarse, quiet, resigned. Elena looked up at him, eyes empty. Keep her out of the plan. Those are your words? He stepped closer, trying to speak, but she moved back. Everything I know, everything I felt, was just part of your plan, wasn't it? Christian? He shook his head, his tone breaking. No, the plan was to protect you. I just didn't expect to need you this much. Need me, or use me. Christian clenched his fists. If I'd wanted to use you, you'd have been dead long ago. Elena? She met his eyes, sad, steady, unflinching. I don't even know who you are anymore. The man who saved me, the man who kissed me, or the man who wrote these words? He didn't answer. The silence between them felt like a wall, unbreakable, suffocating. Finally, Christian spoke softly. If I tell you I love you, will you believe me? No. Her voice trembled. Love doesn't hide behind lies. It takes courage. He stood behind her, close enough for his breath to touch her hair, but he didn't reach out. And if courage gets you killed? She turned, tears streaking her cheeks. Then at least I'll know I lived honestly. That night, Christian left the estate. No one knew where he went. Franco left a short letter on the table for Elena. When the boss says he loves, it's the only truth he has. But sometimes, that love is how he destroys himself. Elena held the letter, her heart hollow. She looked out the window. Rain shimmered under the lamplight like broken glass. Somewhere in the city, Christian Moretti was fighting demons he could never name, and she, the one person he had tried to keep out of the darkness, had now stepped straight into the storm's heart. The rain finally stopped on the fourth morning. The sky opened into a quiet shade of silver gray, a cold light, as if the world had stayed awake all night. Elena stood on the second-floor balcony, a thin shawl slipping from her shoulders. In the garden below, raindrops still clung to the maple branches, reflecting the dim light of dawn. Christian had been gone for 4 days. Each night, she heard the faint ring of Franco's phone down the hall, followed by silence. No one said a word, but she could feel it. Something was coming. Something larger than the pain between two people. She touched the ring on her finger. For the first time, it felt heavy. Love and guilt, they always seemed to walk hand in hand in Christian's world. At noon, Franco brought her a thick envelope. From the boss, he said quietly. He told me to give it to you only after I leave. His voice faltered, and there was a shadow of worry in his eyes that he didn't try to hide. When Franco was gone, Elena's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was not a letter, but a stack of documents and a plane ticket to Paris, departing at dawn. Between the files was a handwritten note from Christian. The handwriting was firm, slanted, full of restrained strength, Elena. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer somewhere you can find me. Don't look for me. I've chosen to face what I've done. Some debts can only be paid in blood, not forgiveness. This account, this house in Connecticut, they're all yours. Leave the country before sunrise. When you see the Hudson glowing in the morning light, I'll already be gone. See, The page was damp, maybe from rain, maybe from tears. Elena folded it carefully, her chest hollow, numb. She knew he was walking into a place no one ever returned from. That afternoon, an explosion thundered in the distance, shaking the entire estate. Franco rushed to the balcony, his face pale. Black smoke rose on the horizon from the direction of the old Moretti docks. Elena froze. She didn't need anyone to tell her. He was there. She bolted down the stairs, ignoring Franco's shouts. Her shoes slipped on the wet floor as she ran. The car roared out of the gate, slicing through mist and drizzle toward the Hudson. The old docks were in ruins, flames still licking the wreckage of a collapsed warehouse. The air was thick with the metallic scent of burning steel. Sirens wailed in the distance, echoing off the water. Elena pushed past the barricades, her hands shaking. A man in an FBI jacket stepped in front of her. "You can't go in there," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Where's Christian? He's in there, isn't he?" The man said nothing, and in that silence, she understood everything. Her knees buckled. She fell to the wet, blackened ground, her hands clutching the soot-stained earth as the world blurred around her. All that remained was the choking taste of ash. That night, Elena somehow drove back to the mansion, she couldn't remember how. Rain had returned, softer this time, as if the world itself was weeping for those who couldn't. She opened the file Christian had left behind. Between the dry sheets of paper was a small photograph, a candid shot of her in a cafe in Boston. 3 years ago, she was smiling, holding an Italian book in her hands. On the back, in his handwriting, "The only person who ever made me want to live." She broke down, tears flooding freely. All anger, all betrayal gone. Only love remained fragile, impossible, and eternal. But pain wasn't done with her yet. 2 days later, the news reported explosion at Hudson Docks, linked to International Arms Network. Notorious crime figure Christian Moretti presumed dead. Elena read the headline slowly, each word pressing into her like a knife. Presumed dead. 3 small words frail as a thread of hope, but enough to keep her from letting go. A week passed. She didn't leave the house, barely ate, surviving only on memory. Then, one night, Franco arrived with a small parcel, sent from an unknown address. Inside was the ring she had once taken off, and a slip of paper, hastily scrawled in his familiar hand. "If love is a sin, then let me bear it for you." Her fingers trembled as she held it. He was alive. She knew it not by reason, but by the way her heart still beat in rhythm with his. That night, she opened the balcony doors and let the wind scatter her hair. Lightning flickered across the clouds, revealing the Hudson winding below in the mist. A small boat glided across the curve of the river, just a glint of light from its bow before it vanished into fog. She couldn't see the man steering, but at the prow, something faintly golden shimmered the ring. Her heart pounded. Elena leaned forward, eyes straining into the night. The boat dissolved into darkness. She whispered, "Barely breathing, Christian." No reply, only the wind brushing against her skin a touch soft enough to hurt. The next morning, Franco announced he was leaving the mansion. He handed her another envelope. "The last thing the boss left for you." Inside was a single sheet of music handwritten, titled Valse in the Dark. At the bottom corner, a small note in Italian read, "If there is another life, I'll find you no names, no blood debts, just 2 ordinary souls in the crowd." Elena pressed the page to her chest, eyes closed. A drop of water fell onto the ink. She couldn't tell if it came from the rain outside or from her own tears. That evening, she sat at the piano for the first time in days. Her fingers touched the keys, and the waltz began slow, soft, like the breath of memory. The notes drifted into the sound of the rain, dissolving into the night like a promise unspoken. When the last chord faded, she whispered into the silence, "If you're still alive, keep your promise. And if you're gone, I'll live for both of us." Outside, thunder rolled away into the distance. The wind swept east along the Hudson, carrying a single scrap of paper floating over the water, its words fading under the rain, "La verità ti libera." The truth will set you free. 3 months had passed since the night the small boat drifted across the Hudson. Winter had settled over Connecticut White, silent, as though the world itself was trying to hide the grief of the living. Elena lived alone in the vast mansion that once echoed with his footsteps. She rose early, made coffee, read the paper, sometimes swept snow from the garden and everything quiet, everything deliberate, as if each small act could keep her from breaking. But when night came and the fire burned low, she still heard him, that low voice, soft as wind through the curtains. "Don't look for me." She tried not to believe it, but sometimes it was easier to believe in a ghost than in a disappearance. One morning, while cleaning the bookshelf, she found a leather-bound notebook hidden behind a panel of wood. The cover was worn, engraved with 3 letters, "Im." On the first page was his handwriting, slanted, firm, unmistakably his. This journal was never meant to be read, but if someone finds it, understand this love, too, can be a form of sin. Each page was a fragment of Christian's soul, scattered confessions of sleepless nights, people he had lost, and the moments he nearly gave up. One passage made her breath catch. "She thinks I'm cold, but every time she touches me, I have to hold myself together not to melt. She's the only reason I fear death, because I've never had someone to miss when I'm gone." Elena closed the book, tears streaming down her face. The man the world called a demon was, in truth, a weary soul trying to love from within his own darkness. That night, snow fell thick and silent. The lights flickered, then went out completely. She lit the fireplace, the flame casting faint shadows across the wall, glinting on the ring in her hand. A soft knock sounded at the window. She froze, turned. No one only whined and snow. But then a figure passed through the faint glow outside the garden. Her heart stopped. It couldn't be. She threw on her coat and ran out barefoot onto the snow. In the pale storm, a man stood there tall, wrapped in a long coat, a black scarf around his neck. She stopped dead in her tracks. Christian. He turned. Thinner, paler, eyes deeper, but the same faint smile she had memorized. She ran toward him, but he lifted a hand. His voice hoarse. "Don't. They're still watching you." She froze, breath trembling. You're alive. I told you I'd find you." His words were light as wind, but his tone cracked. Elena's trembling hand reached to touch his face. His skin was cold but alive. She burst into tears. He pulled her into his arms tightly, desperately, as if letting go meant losing her again forever. They sat by the fire late into the night. Elena poured tea, her hands still shaking. "They said you were dead." Christian smiled faintly. "Maybe I should have been. But death is a luxury when the living still need you to pay their debts." She studied him, a new scar along his jaw, bandages under his shirt. "Where have you been all this time?" "Hiding in the dark. I had to make the world believe I was gone to finish one last thing." He took a black envelope from his coat and placed it on the table. Proof of the entire arms network. "The people behind the Moretti name are no longer mine. I just need time to end them." Elena's hands clenched. "You want to start over?" "No. I just want to wash the past clean so no one else carries my sins." He looked at her deeply. "Not even you." She smiled through her tears. "You've never carried them alone." "Christian, I'm here because I chose to be." The night stretched on, but for the first time in months, there was peace between them, no anger, no fear, only the hum of the wind and 2 hearts beating close. Christian spoke quietly, his voice low, like a confession. "I once thought I didn't deserve love. But the night I saw you cry as I left, I realized that if I could believe in anything, it was you." Elena laid her hand on his chest, feeling the faint, steady rhythm beneath her palm. "You've lived your whole life in darkness. Maybe it's time you let the light pass through you once." He gave a faint smile, eyes glinting in the firelight. "And if that light burns me, then at least it will keep you warm." In that moment, they needed no promises, only breath meeting breath, a kiss written from both fear and longing. By morning, the snow had stopped. Elena awoke to find the chair beside her empty. Christian was gone. Only his black scarf remained and a folded note on the table. "I'll return when every debt is paid. If I don't make it, live for me, as you once said." She pressed the paper to her chest. Her heart ached, but she didn't cry. She knew this time he wasn't running, he was walking the final road toward redemption. 3 weeks later, a man arrived at the mansion. Brown coat, glasses, introducing himself as an FBI agent. He showed his badge, voice calm but wary. "Miss Monroe, we need to talk. About Christian Moretti." She invited him in. Steam rose from the teacup between them. "He's still alive, isn't he?" "We can't confirm that. But hours ago, headquarters received an encrypted file from an anonymous account. Inside was the full evidence against the Moretti network, including FBI documents lost 8 years ago." Elena said nothing, but tears welled in her eyes. "He did it." "Yes. But the sender disappeared right after transmitting the data. We don't know where he is." That night, she went to the riverbank. The sky was clear, the water reflecting the moon like glass. She laid his scarf gently upon the current, letting it drift, carrying away the past that had bound them both. The wind stirred softly. In the sound of the waves, she thought she heard his voice faint, tender. "The truth will set you free," she whispered back, her lips trembling in a bittersweet smile, "and love will set you free." A gust of wind rose, carrying the scarf far downstream. Elena looked up at the sky. A single star streaked across bright, swift, then gone. But in that fleeting light, she knew whether he lived or not. The best part of him had never left her. By morning, the snow had melted, revealing the first green shoots of spring. Elena sat by the window, holding the old journal in her hands. On the last page, there was a new line written in a familiar hand. "If you're reading this, it means I kept my promise. I am no longer a Moretti, only a man learning how to love, in a world that no longer remembers us." Elena closed the book gently, a soft smile blooming on her lips. Outside, the sunlight glowed on the lake, warm and quiet like him, like the love they had saved together from the dark. Spring arrived quietly. After months of cold, Connecticut seemed reborn, snow melting into streams, birds singing on the rooftops. The mansion where Elena lived remained the same, still, misty, but no longer heavy with sorrow. She planted lavender along the walkway, repainted the walls, and opened the windows to let the sunlight flood in. It was her small ritual of renewal, not because she had forgotten Christian, but because she wanted to keep her promise to him to live for them both. Sometimes, in the early morning, she still made 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, one for the man who was gone, or perhaps never truly had been, because somewhere, she could still feel him warm, gentle, like a breath on the back of her neck. One afternoon, while cleaning his old study, she found a sealed envelope that had slipped from a hidden drawer. On it were the words, "Open only when you're no longer afraid." She smiled faintly. Maybe she had passed fear a long time ago. Inside was a map of Italy, a small red mark over Sicily. Tucked beside it, a plane ticket under a false name, and a photograph of a seaside house, white walls, purple bougainvillea climbing the frame. On the back of the photo, a single line read, "If there's a place where I can be someone else, it's here." Elena's heart trembled. No one but Christian could have written those words. She folded the map, looked out the window at the sun sinking behind the trees, and made a quiet decision, soft but certain, like a steady breath. 2 weeks later, she arrived in Sicily. The air was warmer, thick with the scent of oranges and sea salt. The wind played through her hair, carrying the echo of something long past calling her name. The seaside village was peaceful cobblestone streets, white houses with red roofs, children flying kites in the wind. She asked about the house in the picture. An old woman pointed down the road, her voice raspy but kind. "That one, it belonged to an Italian-American man. Tall, dark-haired, lived quietly. He left a few weeks ago. He's alive. Yes, but no one knows where he went. He only left a box for a woman named Elena." The woman fetched a small oak box from her cupboard. Elena's heartbeat stumbled as it was placed in her hands. Inside was an old recorder and a folded note. "Play when you're ready." She sat on the stone steps, the sea wind tangling her hair, and pressed play. His voice, low, rough, achingly familiar, filled the air. "Elena, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back. But don't be sad. For me, love doesn't need presents to exist. Some people we can only love completely by not being with them. I don't know if fate will give us a second chance, but if it does, I want to meet you again in a small cafe, where no one calls me Moretti, and you're just the girl reading Italian poetry like the first time I saw you. Then I'll ask, black coffee or milk? And you'll smile the way you always do. The recording clicked off, leaving only the sound of waves. Elena pressed the recorder to her heart, tears streaming freely. That voice, even as an echo, felt as though he was right there, smiling at her. That evening, she walked along the shore. The moon shimmered on the water. Fishing boats floated in the distance, nets glinting under the silver light. The breeze smelled of salt, pine, and something ancient, something that felt like memory. She stopped by the cliffs, gazing at the quiet village below. Then she heard its footsteps behind her. Soft, steady, heartbreakingly familiar. She turned. A tall figure approached through the moonlight, his gait slightly uneven. The light caught his face thinner, sunburned. But him, Christian. Elena couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes before she could breathe. He stopped a few steps away, his eyes deep, filled with exhaustion and emotion. I promised I'd find you. She broke down, running to him, arms wrapping around him tight. The warmth of his body made her shiver real, alive, not a dream. He whispered hoarsely against her ear. I have to go, Elena. They want to finish everything, and I can't let them hurt you. You've fought your whole life. You can stop now. She gripped his coat, looking into his eyes. No one has to win against the past, Christian. We just have to survive it. He was silent. The moonlight traced the scars on his face, new ones, barely healed. Then he smiled, tired, but true. For the first time, I think I've already won, because I still have you. She touched his cheek softly. I told you the light doesn't burn you. It only warms. He nodded, pulling her closer. The next morning, they left the small village, heading toward Palermo. The coastal road glimmered under sunlight, the sea stretching endlessly beside them. Elena rested her head on his shoulder, whispering, Where will you go now? Somewhere my name doesn't exist on any record. And me, he squeezed her hand. Wherever you go, I'll follow. She smiled through quiet tears. In their world, happiness had always worn the colors of tragedy. But for once, she wasn't afraid of that. By sunset, they stopped on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean. The sea shimmered gold beneath the fading light. Christian opened the trunk and took out a small box. Inside were 2 rings, one of them hers, the one he had once sent drifting down the Hudson. He held her hand, voice trembling. The first time I gave you this, it was a lie, a promise made to protect you. This time, I give it back not to hide you, but to keep you. Elena looked into his eyes, the ocean reflected in them. And if I lose it again? He smiled faintly. Then I'll find you again, no matter the lifetime. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissed him softly. The wind tangled her hair, and the setting sun poured its gold across them, 2 souls who had walked through darkness, now standing on the edge of freedom and fate. That night, they stayed in the small seaside house, the same one from the photograph. Warm light spilled through the windows, glowing across the wall where an old photo hung Christian at the harbor, younger, eyes carrying the same quiet sorrow. Elena touched the frame, her voice barely a whisper. You're not the man in this picture anymore. Christian's reply was soft as the sea breeze. And you're not the girl I once saved. You're the one who saved me. Outside, the waves whispered gently against the shore. Inside that little house, 2 people who had once lost each other in darkness had finally found their way back into the light. No more fear, no more lies. Only a love quiet enough to need no proof, and strong enough to outlive death itself. The Mediterranean Sea was still as breath. That morning, the sun rose slowly, painting the white houses along the hillside in a warm golden hue. Elena opened her eyes. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, and the distant sound of waves played like a tender melody that never ended. She turned. Christian sat by the window, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hair slightly tousled, a cigarette half burned between his fingers. He stared at the sea, his gaze distant as if everything around him was just a fading memory. You didn't sleep again. Her voice was husky with the morning air. Christian turned, smiled faintly. I'm afraid that if I close my eyes, I'll wake up somewhere else, somewhere you're not. She walked to him, placed a hand on his shoulder. I used to be afraid of that too. But look, we're still here. He took her hand and kissed it gently, a simple gesture, yet full of unspoken gratitude. Outside, the sky was clear. Flocks of tiny birds crossed the horizon, their reflections flickering on the surface of the water like shards of light. They sat in silence, listening to the wind brushing through the window, warm, salty, like a quiet kind of forgiveness. The days that followed passed peacefully. Elena began writing her story not to publish, but to remember. She wanted to capture every moment from the first time he held her hand in the dark, to the night he returned beneath the Sicilian moon. Christian spent his time repairing the house, plastering cracks, fixing tiles, moving carefully, as if every stroke of labor was a way to redeem his past. In the afternoons, they went to the small beach behind the house. Elena painted, he read, or simply watched her as if that alone was proof that life could still be good. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she asked quietly, if people found out you're still alive, what would you do? Christian smiled, a kind, tired smile. Maybe I wouldn't run anymore. I've been running too long. And if they came for you? He clasped her hand, squeezing softly. Then I'd go, but this time, not to leave you, to protect what you believe in. She nodded, eyes glistening. No promises followed, only his hand, steady and warm, against the sound of waves. One morning, Christian received a letter with no name. Inside was an old photograph of him with his father, Angelo, and a short note. The last storm is coming. Choose keep hiding, or end it. Elena found him sitting silently with the photo. His eyes were deep, distant, the look of someone who already knew what was to come. You're going, aren't you? He looked up, smiled faintly. Just one last time, then it'll finally be over. She didn't ask where. She didn't stop him. She only held him long and tight until the sunlight turned gold across the red rooftops. Come back to me. Promise. He nodded. If I'm still breathing, I'll find my way back. 3 days later, he left. Elena stood on the porch, watching the car disappear down the winding road toward the city. The wind carried the scent of oranges and salt, mingled with the rhythm of the sea, like a farewell sung by souls who once lost each other. Time passed slowly. She waited in silence, the way one waits for a returning season. One night, the sea wind rose fierce. The window flew open, and rain lashed through. Elena woke with a start. Stepping onto the porch, she saw a figure staggering up the coastal path through the rain. Christian. His clothes were drenched, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood, but he smiled. The weary smile of a man who had walked out of hell. Elena ran to him, clutching him tight. Are you insane? He dropped his head against her shoulder, his voice rough, drained. No, I just finished paying for everything. She looked into his eyes and saw no more secrets, no rage, no shadow of old wounds, only peace. A week later, Christian sat on the porch, back against the wall, listening as Elena read aloud the final lines of her manuscript. Her voice was soft, warm, steady. They say love can't save a lost soul, but sometimes it's the very thing that leads them home. And if even once in your life someone makes you want to be better, then none of your past mistakes were ever in vain. She paused, looked up. He smiled gently. That line, was it about me? No, about us. Christian reached out, brushed her cheek. You know, I once thought I was born to live in darkness. But then you came not to drag me out, but to sit beside me until I found the courage to step into the light myself. Elena said nothing. She simply rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady, unafraid rhythm of his heartbeat. On the last evening of spring, they sat by the shore. The sun was setting, painting the sky crimson. Waves whispered softly, the light dissolving on the water. Christian spoke, voice calm as the wind. If one day you wake up and I'm gone, don't think I left. Maybe I just became part of the sea watching you from afar. Elena held his hand, smiling through tears. You're a terrible liar. But this time, I'll believe you." They looked at each other, no words, no fear. Under the burning sky, two people who had once fled from the world now sat together in peace as if, finally, they had learned how to love without being afraid of loss. That night, the moon rose over a quiet sea. Elena lay in Christian's arms, hearing his sleepy whisper drift through the dark, "Thank you for believing in a man who stopped believing in himself." She smiled, stroking his hair gently. Moonlight softened his face, serene, almost weightless. And somewhere between dream and waking, she knew all the pain, all the darkness, had dissolved into their shared breath beneath the night. The next morning, the sea murmured as if no storm had ever passed. The little seaside house glowed with sunlight. On the table, a cup of coffee still steamed beside her unfinished manuscript, The Man Who Walked Out of the Dark. Elena smiled, closed her eyes, and inhaled the scent of salt air. She knew that wherever the future led, he was still there in every bright morning, in every wave that kissed the shore, and in her own heart, where the darkness had finally turned into light. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.